Are you ready to analyze Happy Gilmore's golf swing? Because that's what we're doing today. We're going to be looking at Happy Gilmore's golf swing from the original movie and then comparing that to the new Happy Gilmore 2 trailer 30 years later. How has this swing changed? Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? We'll be the judge of that. Happy Gilmore's swing evolution 30 years later. Now, of course, we have to mention that we're working from a movie trailer, also a movie from 30 years ago. So we're really limited in terms of camera angles and things like that, but we're going to do our best. We're going to try to pull out what we can from these little snippets. Let's start with the setup. What is the first thing that stands out to you? The first thing is that his setup and his swing in general is surprisingly similar, especially when you look at his shoulder turn. Even 30 years later, his shoulder turn is remarkably consistent, which suggests that those fundamentals are really ingrained from his younger days. But it's not all the same. There are some differences. You start to notice subtle changes when you look closely. Take the distance between his arms and his body. Younger Happy had this incredible stretch across his torso, just generating so much power. But older Happy, his arms are closer to his head, and there's a slight bend at the elbows. So it looks like he's lost a little bit of that stretch. We naturally lose flexibility as we age, so it makes sense that his swing would adapt in that way, but it is something that could be improved upon with targeted exercises. Even Happy Gilmore can't just show up and expect to be the same golfer that he was 30 years ago. Speaking of Happy Gilmore's swing, you can't talk about Happy Gilmore without talking about the Happy Step. It's iconic, but in the sequel it looks different. It seems much more condensed. It's almost like a single step now compared to that full-on skip and run that he used to do. So is that because he's hitting an iron in this new clip rather than a driver like he uses in the original movie? It could be. An iron usually calls for a more compact swing, so that could explain the shorter step. With a driver, you need a bigger swing generally, so you take a bigger step, and with an iron, you're taking a smaller swing and a smaller step. But could it also be that he's just become a better golfer? That's possible too. Maybe he's traded some of that raw power for more control and precision, which would make sense for a more experienced golfer. Now let's get into some of the finer details of the golf swing. We're going to talk about sway gap. Imagine a line running straight through Happy's body from head to toe. Now, during his backswing, that line's going to tilt. And the sway gap is basically how much that line tilts. It's the difference in angle between his upper body and his lower body. What is the difference then between younger Happy and older Happy in terms of his sway gap? Younger Happy had a larger sway gap. You could see that his lower body shifted farther forward than his upper body. That separation helped him create a really powerful upward drive with his swing. Older Happy, his upper and lower body are more in sync. With a smaller sway gap, this can often lead to a steeper swing path. He's not getting as much of that like whip passion. Less separation equals less whip. What does this all mean for how he's actually generating power? Younger Happy was all about that explosive leg drive. You could see it in how his left heel lifted off the ground as he pushed upwards. It was all vertical force. Older Happy, on the other hand, he's not generating that same level of explosiveness from his legs, so it seems like he's relying more on a lateral slide for power. Now, lateral slide is basically during his downswing, instead of just driving upwards, older Happy's back foot moves towards his side. It's almost like he's pushing off a wall, and this generates power horizontally rather than vertically. It's more of a sideways motion. It's a different way of creating force, but it can still be very effective. Younger Happy vertical force, older Happy more horizontal force. That's a pretty significant change in his swing mechanics, and it makes sense. He's probably not as explosive as he was in his younger days, but he's making up for it with this lateral movement. It's a trade-off explosiveness for consistency. Now, what I find really interesting is that even his finish position has changed. You can see it in the trailer. In the original movie, Happy's left leg is braced at the end of his swing. His toes are still on the grain, and that's typical of a swing that's powered by a vertical drive. But in the sequel, his back foot slides way over as he finishes. It's almost like he's doing a lunge. It is kind of like a lunge, and that's a clear sign of that. Lateral slide that we were talking about. Even his finish position is telling us something about how he's generating power. His whole swing has adapted to this new way of moving. Now, what's amazing to me is that even with these changes, he still looks really athletic. For his age, he's clearly still in great shape, like he's still Happy Gilmore. It's like a more mature version a more experienced version? That raises an interesting question. His body is just naturally adapting to getting older. Maybe he hasn't even thought about it. It's just happening. But I think the bigger question for Happy Gilmore fans is, can he still win? Can he still win with this new swing? Does this evolved swing have what it takes to bring home another championship? That's the $1 million question. He might have lost some of that youthful explosiveness, but the consistency and control that he's gained could give him a real edge on the course, because golf is not all about power. Is he still going to be throwing his clubs and yelling at the ball? Is he still going to have those legendary meltdowns? Well, if the trailer's anything to go by, I think he's still got that fiery spirit. What advice would we give Happy? First of all, I think we'd remind him that he's not a rookie anymore. He's got 30 years of experience under his belt. He's a veteran. That's a huge advantage. Embrace the experience. Don't try to be the same golfer you were 30 years ago. Use what you've learned. Focus on your strength, like that lateral power source. That seems to be working really well for him. Keep working on that, and maybe even do some specific exercises to target those muscles. Really maximize that lateral motion. Make it as efficient as possible. That's the physical side of things. But what about the mental side? Well, Happy's always been known for his temper. While we don't want to take away that fire, I think it's important for him to learn how to channel it, use it to his advantage, instead of letting it control him. What advice would you give Happy Gilmore? Think about it. Let us know in the comments. We want to hear your thoughts. And of course, be sure to check out Happy Gilmore 2.